So by far, one of the top requests that I get when I do any IEM review, regardless of price, is for the Blon BL03s. So I went and bought them. They're 50 bucks and these things rock. Like 100%, they are an antidote to high cost IEMs. So headphones and IEMs are both in a category where I don't think a lot of people see a lot of value in going significantly higher in terms of price. And I think it really comes down to the perception of what you're getting versus the higher priced item. And what do I mean by this? So let's say you spend $50 on a pair of speakers, right? The pair of speakers that you're gonna get, they're gonna be relatively cheaply made. They're probably gonna make sound. It's probably not gonna sound all that great. Probably won't produce too much bass. You know, it's not gonna be a very high fidelity item. Then if you spend $1,000, you can get a much different system. It's gonna be built better. It's usually gonna be bigger. And it just keeps going up from there, you know, $5,000, $10,000. All of a sudden you get more and more stuff and it looks better. It's made with better materials. It's heavier. The frequency response is more accurate. The sound usually sounds better. You get subwoofers involved, all these things. But when it comes to headphones and IEMs, you're working within a very small container. So if you spend $50 on an IEM, what you're getting when you purchase that $50 IEM is just about the same as what you're getting when you pay for a $2,000 IEM in terms of the build and the quality of the materials. There's a little bit of leeway, but it's not much. Most of that money goes into R&D. But there is this whole kind of cheap IEM market, which is aiming to really be the best bang for your buck in all of audio, actually. And this is a great example. And I think the first place that I want to start with on this is the bass response. The bass response on here is actually pretty awesome. And it's more than just the amount, which that is kind of the strongest area of it, is the sub bass. It's really, really strong and sounds really good. But it's also the quality. It's the texturization of the bass. So you can go from one song with a deep 20 to 40 hertz tone to a different song with a deep 20 to 40 hertz tone. And just depending on how it was recorded, those 20 to 40 hertz are going to sound drastically different, rather than sometimes you get this omnipresent blob when a headphone can produce bass, but it can't get the texture correct. And what's funny about this is that this is something that I don't see in headphones until like 200 to 350 bucks is really where you start getting into really good bass response in terms of the quality, not just the amount. In general, IEMs offer an entry and a doorway into that price category, but not at that price category. So they're very intriguing devices for me. Now, while I do like the tins, I quite like these a bit more. And I'm not just defending my purchase here. I could have bought a pair of tins if I wanted the tins, but I think these are actually better than the tins. I think the tins are definitely better at mid-range performance and probably even have a little bit more finite treble resolution, something that this is not the best at. We'll get into that in a second. But overall, warmer sound signature coming out of this while still maintaining clarity and separation between all the instruments and vocalists. This is exactly what I look for in terms of my personal preference. This thing is right up my alley, and I think a lot of yours, as seen by the comments, because they're kind of crazy. Another thing that's impressive about this is the build, but for one very particular reason. Got this glossy finish, and surprisingly, there are no fingerprints. So I'll bring out something like the Final, which is made of metal and has a polished finish like this. And that finish is a little bit better, but it's a fingerprint magnet. You constantly have to clean it. This, no fingerprints. Pretty impressive. Now the fit is something that I'm not totally stoked on, but I actually think is still pretty good and it's gonna fit a lot of people's ears. There's something about this particular IEM that's making me use different sizes of tips, bigger on the left and smaller on the right. That's the only way that I can get a seal with this particular one. And the tips that they come with are definitely passable for 50 bucks. They're not really anything spectacular, but I think I've done a couple tip swaps on this particular pair of headphones, and the stock ones sound just as good as the aftermarket ones. I can hear all that. You're not really going to be blocking out a ton of sound, so definitely not a very noise isolating in-ear monitor. Now, while I do consider these a bit of an antidote to those higher priced IEMs, there is one particular area where I think higher priced IEMs are going to perform a little bit better, and that performance is going to definitely scale with the price tag. But one thing that this is definitely missing that something like some of the higher end Finals have, or the Dream XLS, or the Meze Rai Penta, or the Fur M5s, is staging. The instrumental separation, that's something that usually won't get real finite until you get into the higher price categories. But in terms of the quality of most of the sound signature, this is actually really, really good. It's definitely a slightly warmer shifted headphone, so there's a bit of a sacrifice in the top end in terms of not only forwardness, but a little bit of detail resolution. It's not the best, but judging on a $50 price tag, it's definitely very impressive. But you know, if we're going to be comparing this to higher priced IEMs, which I actually think it should be considered amongst those, because I do think it performs in that category in terms of the sound quality. I actually think it's pretty impressive, if I haven't said that enough. Now, the way the mid-range is handled on this is also fairly interesting, because it's forward enough to really give you an understanding of what the vocalist's characteristics are, and you're getting this real standout performance, and that separation factor is actually decent. But it skips the hotness of the S's. S's sound completely natural in my kind of findings here. They sound like S's, they sound like they should, they sound like T's, but when you're talking to somebody or you're hearing a live performance without a microphone and without this processing of singing, you can hear S's and they're clear, but they're not forward. They're not jumping out at you when you're just talking to somebody one-on-one like this. And that's kind of what this sounds like. It sounds like a natural S performance, which is something that a lot of the IEMs that I have heard, even higher priced ones, seem to get wrong. They either seem to be completely dead in the S region or far too strong and far too sibilant. Not with this. So very impressive as well. So mid-range performance and the bass performance, I think, hits far above the price category. The top end of treble response is very pleasing in terms of the performance and delivery, but in terms of resolution and that finite detail, it could be a little bit better. Like with the tins, I think those have a little bit better sound to them. Although the tins have always sounded a little bit metallic to me and have like a timbre characteristic that seems to be a little bit well, more metallic sounding. So from kind of a timbre perspective, I think these outperform that. But in terms of resolution, I think those do a little bit better. And then there's the soundstage, which based off of price, again, is very good and kind of surprising, because it really tends to take on the characteristics of whatever song you're listening to. So if you're listening to modern pop music, not a whole lot of soundstage. Like if you're listening to The Weeknd, not so much. But if you're listening to these live recordings, like sessions from the 17th Ward from Amber Rubarth, you actually do get a fair bit of soundstage for an IEM. It tends to reach out quite far from what would be typical at a $50 IEM price tag. Overall recommendations, fuck yes, 100%. Sorry for the language, but yeah, these are really awesome and actually quite surprising. I was not super stoked on these. Like I was kind of just getting them to do my due diligence. But that's the point of these cheap IEMs, is to kind of take you by surprise and give you something that is far better than what the price tag would suggest. And these things are killing it with that. So they're very good. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Oh, real quick, since this recommendation was so good, let me know what other cheap IEMs you would like me to check out. I want to avoid doing this thing where like every day I'm coming out with a new IEM review that's better than the last one, even though lately I feel like that's kind of what it's just the natural progression of things have ended up being. And I also want to avoid the super fast paced IEM market. It seems like every other day there's like the new latest and greatest thing that one reviewer says is better than everything else. But it doesn't necessarily mean that this IEM is now bad just because one is also good. So if you're seeing this a little bit later in the future from when this video is posted, you can pretty much confidently purchase this. There may be slightly better stuff out there, but this is still a super solid IEM or in-ear headphone. All right, guys, thanks a lot for watching. My name's Josh, signing off.